hold on. There's so many threads here.
Yeah, it's a lot of threads.
Yeah, there's a lot of threads. I don't want to let it continue to hang in the air, this question of space. You sort of threw that out parenthetically, but like, well, I've never heard that before. So you believe, going back 30 years, that people in the U.S. government and in the finance world wanted money for space?
Yeah, it wasn't U.S. government. It was the central banking. If you look at the group of people who meet through the BIS.
What's that?
The BIS is the Bank of International Settlements, and it's the central bank of central banks.
Where is that located?
It's in Basel, Switzerland, and it has 63 of the most powerful central banks as its members, and the New York Fed and the Fed are both shareholders. They became shareholders in 1994.
In one sentence, what's the purpose of the Bank of International Settlements?
Okay, so there are two things you need to know about the Bank of International Settlements.
I'm not sure my brain's big enough for this, but keep going.
It is.
Okay.
It has sovereign immunity.
What does that mean?
It's above the law.
It's its own country.
Right. It's its own country. It has its own police force. And essentially, other than one of its staff being in a car accident or, minor things, no one has the legal authority to move against it. Okay. It has sovereign immunity. That's number one. Number two, it can move money and hold it on its on its balance sheet and manage money secretly. So if I want to, I'm grossly oversimplifying, if I want to steal $21 trillion from the U.S. government and park it on the balance sheet of the BIS, it can move it anywhere in the world and it can keep it on its balance sheet secretly.
Why would there be an organization? First of all, where does its power? Like, who empowered it to have sovereign immunity and the right?
It was created after World War I and sort of collected its powers and got going in the 30s. And it was created in theory to manage the reparations of the German government. But if you read the real history, it was because the Bank of England and the central bankers wanted an entity that had sovereign immunity. They wanted to be able to move money secretly. So, for example, if you look at what happened during World War II and all the money that was moving back and forth between the Germans and Americans, Dulles was over in Switzerland helping to manage all these transfers back and forth. So there's a wonderful book called The Tower of Basel by a wonderful Hungarian journalist where he documents and describes the whole history of the Bank of International Settlements. And if you want to understand power in this world, understanding how the Bank of International Settlements and the plumbing of the central banking system works is very, very important.
I've always been worried that if I knew more that I would become mentally ill.
No. So I just have to say that reality is sort of the door that you open to find real solutions. So there are real solutions, and the biggest obstacle to implementing them is nobody wants to face it. So I used to have a pastor who would
Nobody
say,
wants to face the truth of how things actually work.
Nobody wants to face the truth. And I understand that, because the hardest thing I ever had to do, Tucker, was look in the mirror and say, I'm the patsy. I was the Assistant Secretary of Housing. I didn't know, and I went along, and I didn't face this. I should have seen this faster. I should have said, I'm the patsy. And it's sometimes it's harder than facing death to admit that you've been part of, a big lie and you've been tricked.
As someone who advocated for the Iraq War on television, I've lived this to some extent.
Oh, no.
Yes, I did.
Well, part of facing this is you have to forgive yourself. You really have to. But I used to have a pastor who would say, if we can face it, God can fix it. Because you have to understand, we can't fix it. There are many, many things we can do to change the course. And I believe ultimately freedom can prevail. And there's many things we can do to help that happen. But ultimately, this is a spiritual war, and you have to call on God. You have to call on the divine. And that's where the battle is ultimately going to be decided. And that means, literally, I believe this is true, the divine intelligence cannot go to work unless we're willing to face it. We have to look at it. We have to pray. We have to ask for help, and we have to deal with it. And the real solutions will be cultural. There'll be millions of people acting in their own life, refusing to be controlled, individually. So
very, very wise what you just said. I think it's true, and thank you for saying that.